You are 53 years old, sitting outside your daughter's school in a leased SUV, running numbers in your head that refuse to add up. Your phone lights up. It's Tyler, sending a photo of the boat he just put a deposit on. You type back, "Congratulations." Something in your chest tightens instead. Here's what nobody tells men your age. The things that make your life look finished, the house, the title, the club membership, are not holding you up. They're ballast. Weight you loaded on when the water was calm. Weight that only shows its real cost once the tide starts climbing toward your chin. Stay with me, because you're about to find out exactly how much ballast you're carrying right now, and which piece has to go first, before the decade meant to be your peak quietly becomes the one that pulls you under. There's a trap hiding inside almost every successful man's 50s, and it doesn't look like a trap. It looks like a rival. We've talked before on this channel about the compliance overhead, the fixed debt that quietly removes your ability to say no. In your 50s, that overhead doesn't shrink, it compounds. Call it what it actually is: ballast. Every reasonable yes you gave in your 30s and 40s gets loaded onto the same hull, and nobody ever asks what that hull can actually carry before it goes under. Take a man named Walter, 52 years old, plant operations manager, 26 years at the same company. Walter earns $165,000 a year, more than his father made in his best 3 years combined. Walter is not reckless. Walter has never missed a payment in his life. Here is Walter's ballast, piece by piece. A mortgage payment of $3,100 a month, taken out when rates were low and the house felt like a stretch he'd grow into. A truck lease at $620 a month, because after 2 decades of driving whatever was reliable, Walter finally bought something he wanted. A membership at the hunting lodge his father belonged to, $200 a month, mostly for the relationships, he'll tell you, and he means it. $700 a month set aside for 2 teenagers who are 2 years from college bills. Neither of them has fully priced out yet. And $400 a month on a boat that gets used maybe 10 weekends a year and costs money every one of the other 42. Add it up, and Walter's fixed obligations, before he buys a single bag of groceries, run close to $5,000 a month. After taxes, Walter takes home around $9,800 a month. So on paper, Walter looks fine. He clears his bills with room to spare. But that math only answers one question: can Walter afford the payment? It never asks the question that actually matters. Is Walter building wealth, or is he just staying afloat at a higher altitude than he used to? That's the actual trap. Affordability is a cash flow question. Wealth is a completely different question, and most men in their 50s have spent 25 years answering the first one while assuming it was answering the second. Here's what one piece of that ballast actually costs Walter. If he had redirected just $500 a month, the truck payment, into a low-cost index fund starting at age 40, earning an average 7% a year, he would arrive at 65 with roughly $700,000 sitting quietly in that account. Not from some brilliant investment call, from one fewer weight loaded onto the hull 25 years ago. If this is the first time you've actually seen your own numbers laid out like this, a like helps more than you'd think. It's the only way this channel keeps reaching men who are exactly where Walter is and don't know it yet. Now, here's the second piece of ballast almost nobody accounts for, and it has nothing to do with how much Walter saves. It's what happens to that money depending on when the market decides to have a bad year. There's a real, well-documented phenomenon in finance called sequence of returns risk. Picture Walter at 58 with $400,000 in his retirement account, planning to retire at 63. If the market averages 7% a year for those 5 years, in a straight, predictable line, Walter retires with a little over $560,000. Clean, exactly what the retirement calculator told him. Now picture a different order of that exact same average return. The market drops 30% in year 1 of Walter's retirement, then spends the next 19 years averaging closer to 9% to make up for it. On paper, the average looks identical, but Walter is withdrawing 4% every year, while his account is down 30%, which means he's selling shares at a discount every month during the exact stretch when his money most needs to stay intact and keep compounding. Walter's money doesn't last 25 years into retirement. It lasts closer to 14. Same average return. Completely different ending. And the order of those returns is the one variable almost no retirement calculator ever tests. This isn't theoretical. In 2008, plenty of men who retired right into that crash watched their accounts fall by roughly a third at the exact moment they'd started depending on them. The market came back within a few years. Their portfolios didn't because they were withdrawing the entire way down. If you've never actually run this scenario against your own retirement number, drop your age in the comments. I read every one of them, and it tells me exactly which traps to cover next. Here's the third piece of ballast, and it's the one that catches men off guard because it doesn't show up alone. It shows up as three things landing in the same 18 months. The first is a parent who needs care. Most men start contributing financially to an aging parent somewhere around 52. Assisted living in this country typically runs somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000 a month, depending on location and level of care. If a parent has $70,000 saved, which is close to the median for that generation, that money covers less than a year before the bill becomes yours, personally, every month, for as long as it takes. The second is launching kids, not raising them. A 4-year private education in this country now runs somewhere around $60,000 a year once you include everything. That's close to $240,000 for one child. If you've got 2 teenagers and you haven't been funding a college account aggressively since they were toddlers, that gap gets covered from your current income, your home equity, or your own retirement savings. There is no fourth option. The third is something most finance channels won't say out loud. Divorce after 50, sometimes called gray divorce, has become dramatically more common over the last few decades. And the math of a divorce at 53 is not the math of a divorce at 33. At 33, you split what you've started building. At 53, you split what you spent your entire adult life building, right as you have the fewest working years left to rebuild it. Walter's mother needed memory care last year. $6,100 a month. She had $80,000 saved. Walter is now covering close to $3,000 of that gap every month, on top of everything else already loaded onto his hull. Nobody put that in his financial plan, because nobody ever does. If any of this is landing a little too close to home, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure you catch the rest of this series. New breakdowns like this one every week. Now, the fourth piece of ballast is the one nobody wants to look at directly, because admitting it means looking at your own driveway. By 50, most men have built a professional identity. You're known as something. The regional director, the guy who built the department from nothing. That identity is real, and it earned you real money. It also comes with a maintenance bill we've talked about before on this channel, the display cost, the monthly price of looking like you've already arrived. Let me show you 2 men who started in the exact same place. Tyler and Dennis went to the same state school, graduated the same year, took jobs in the same industry within 6 months of each other. By 52, both were earning close to $190,000 a year. Tyler kept what I'd call a visible footprint. Nice house in the right neighborhood, a leased truck upgraded every 3 years, private school for both kids, one big international trip every year, $12,000 to $14,000 minimum. Tyler looks successful by every conventional measure, because he is, on the surface. He was also quietly drawing on a home equity line to close the gap between what he earned and what his life cost. A gap he never fully acknowledged because every single piece of it felt justified on its own. At 50, Tyler had around $390,000 in retirement accounts and about $200,000 in home equity. His actual liquid net worth, the money he could use without selling his house, sat around $110,000. Dennis made different choices, not smaller ones, deliberate ones. He drove a paid-off car for 9 years at a time. He lived in a good school district, not the best one on the map. He took one international trip every 2 years instead of every one. He maxed his retirement contributions from age 38 forward and put another $1,500 a month into a plain, boring index portfolio. At 52, Dennis had $1.1 million across retirement and taxable accounts. His mortgage was more than half paid down. His liquid net worth sat close to $900,000. Same income, same decade, same starting line. One of them bought approval, the other bought options. And here's the part that actually hurts. Tyler knows. He's not confused about what happened. He just couldn't stop while it was happening, because every individual decision felt completely reasonable in the moment. That's not weakness. That's exactly how this trap is built to work. This is the same mechanism we keep coming back to on this channel. The world doesn't reward you for being wealthy. It rewards you for looking wealthy. And those are two different economies running on two different clocks. Tyler was never really paying a landlord. He was paying an audience. And nobody ever told him the lease was still open. Dennis paid nothing to that audience. And by 52, the difference between the two of them wasn't talent, or income, or luck. It was who kept quietly paying a bill nobody ever actually sent them. If you want us to run this same comparison for a situation closer to what your own numbers actually look like, tell us in the comments. A lot of these videos get built directly off of what people ask for. Let's make the compound cost of all this impossible to ignore. Two men, both 50 years old, both earning $170,000 a year. The first has fixed monthly obligations of $10,000 before he spends a single discretionary dollar. After taxes, he takes home roughly $9,300 a month. He is already underwater before groceries. He's either quietly leaning on credit, drawing down equity, or breaking even while building exactly nothing. The second has fixed obligations of $5,500 a month. He's saving $3,800 every month. Same income. Same market. Over the next 15 years, at an average 7% return, the first man ends up with somewhere around $130,000 if he manages to save anything at all. The second man ends up with just over $1 million. Same income, same 15 years. The only variable that moved was the burn rate. Walter, by the way, the man from earlier in this video, is doing something about it. He sold the boat. He renegotiated the truck down to a used one he owns outright. He cut his fixed obligations from just under $5,000 a month to closer to $3,200. He's not going to retire at 60. He'll probably retire at 66 or 67 instead. But he's not going under. And 6 months ago, he wasn't sure that was still true. So here's what you actually do with all of this. 3 things, and none of them are generic. First, calculate your own number this week, not next month. Add up every fixed obligation you have, mortgage or rent, every loan payment, every membership, every subscription you can't cancel with a single phone call, any ongoing support you send to a family member. That total is your floor. It's what the world costs you just to stay standing still. If it's above 60% of your take-home pay, you don't have a discipline problem. You have a structural one. And no budgeting app fixes a structural problem. Removing an obligation does. Second, stress test your retirement number against a bad sequence, not an average one. Model what happens if the market drops in the first 2 years you're actually withdrawing money, not the 2 years before. If your plan only survives a straight line, everything goes fine projection, you don't have a retirement plan. You have a hope dressed up as a spreadsheet. Third, look at every fee attached to your money this quarter. Advisory fees, fund expenses, insurance loads. If the total cost of managing your money runs above roughly 1/3 of 1% a year, you are very likely overpaying, and that difference, compounded over 15 or 20 years, is not a rounding error. It's a second retirement income stream, quietly leaving in amounts too small to ever trigger alarm. The men who reached 60 with real options were never the ones who built the most impressive-looking life. They're the ones who looked honestly at what they were carrying and had the discomfort tolerance to cut some of it loose while everyone around them was still adding more. Most men don't. Most men keep loading the hull right up until the water reaches their chin, not because they're careless, but because every single piece of ballast looked like an achievement the day they took it on. And it is genuinely hard to look at something you're proud of and call it a liability. That's the whole trap, in its simplest form. Not stupidity, not carelessness, just the gap between how something felt the day you built it and what it's quietly doing to you now. The window between where you are and 62 is smaller than it feels, but it's still yours. Cut the ballast before the tide decides for you.